We're going to bring on Admiral Sestak. Admiral, are you there?
Yes, I sure am. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. I thought maybe you started walking back across Pennsylvania again.
I'm driving back from Lehigh Valley over to Montgomery County.
Yeah, last time. Well, that must be better on your feet this time. Last time I spoke to you, you were actually walking across the state to raise awareness of your campaign for a seat in the U.S. Senate in the next election cycle. But I'm just glad that you're on, because I really want to pick your brains about this Iran nuclear deal. Yesterday there was a big rally against it. And, I want to just kind of hear from someone who really knows. You were actually, remind me, you were the first commander, or you had some responsibility with some anti-terrorism work. What was that responsibility?
I was the first director of the Navy's anti-terrorism unit established after 9/11, 2 days after.
2 days after.
Deep Blue.
Wow. Hold on a second. Before we talk about this Iran deal, let me just go back to that time. So tomorrow is the 14th anniversary of 9/11. If you're of a certain age, there's no way that you can't remember that day. You can remember exactly where you were, exactly what you were doing, exactly how you came to find out what was going on. Where were you when it happened?
I was actually stationed at the Pentagon at the time, and I had walked out of it about 30 minutes prior to the plane coming into the Pentagon. And of course, there was the Twin Towers, but one of them also came into the Pentagon. We heard about it down the street, came on back, and everybody was, by that time, it surrounded the Pentagon, and people were there helping out. We went to the command center that got established on the hill overlooking it. There was an office that I had been in charge of, the number of men and women, and I had been moved to take over a different office about, I think, 6 or 8 months prior. A number of those people I knew had worked for me, never came out. It has pretty darn close feelings on it. The Chief of Naval Operations called me the next day and said, I want you to establish an anti-terrorism unit in the Navy. The one that looked at the strategic, the operational, not the tactical, but the operational strategic theories. How can we adjust for what soon came to be known as global war terror? As part of that, I went forward shortly after the Afghanistan war began for very short missions, nothing like our courageous Marine Corps and Army brethren, but for a short mission on the ground in Afghanistan, and came out, and that was something in a sense to come back and remember those who were there. And if there's something I would love to do and continue to do as I did as a congressman, as U.S. Senator, is make sure that we never forget those who go forward to serve us, because 47% of them are in prison today in Pennsylvania, who are veterans, are there for drug or alcohol-related crime, where they came back from Afghanistan or Vietnam. And we didn't even know what PTSD was after Vietnam. And then they came back with no help. They got into drugs, didn't get a job, and all of a sudden they're in Grady Ford Max Security Prison, where I went last Veterans Day to visit the veterans up there. I go to a prison every year to visit our vets. And I only bring that up that it wasn't just that they went forward. We got to remember our men and women when they come home.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, you're listening to Urban Insight. Again, this is your host, Mark Kelly Tyler. You can call in to get in on a part of this conversation at 215-634-8065. If you're outside the area, 866-361-0900. If you ever wanted to speak to someone who is actually an admiral or someone who is actually a member of the House of Representatives, this is your chance. We're speaking with Joe Sestak, who is currently a candidate for the U.S. Senate here in the state of Pennsylvania. And he's just sharing with us his experience on 9/11. That must have been a life-changing experience for you.
It was, in several ways. One was that, I'd lived my life in the military. I joined up during the Vietnam era. And we always wanted, so to speak, our wars to be away games. We wanted them outside the United States. And all of a sudden, with 9/11, we had a home game. How do we prevent terrorists from striking us ever again in our homes? And the whole change in our ethos of how we try to better come to grips with that was something, but it also was personal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those were men and women that I knew, but also this. I was last night at Villanova University doing a town hall on Iran, and I did it at the ROTC unit there, and a young man came up to me afterwards and said, my father was at time, and he served with you on the ship that you were on. I said, I remember your father very well. He was not only a great officer, but he had left the Navy to go start a different life. A day or two after Afghanistan happened, after this 9/11 happened, he called me and said, I want to come back in and help again. I guess what I'm telling you is sort of like that great book, motto in the great book where Isaiah turns to God when God says to him, who will go for us, whom will I send? And Isaiah replied, here am I, send me. So many of our great youth say, here am I, send me. And so that changed it also of how many wanted to come back. And so in my sense is, let's not forget those who serve us.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll tell you that's totally unexpected. So I really appreciate it. I'm certain that the listeners here are really are feeling you on that. So I appreciate it. Now, I do want to talk about this Iran deal. We spoke about this a few weeks ago, you and I. You called in. And since that time, I know that there is always a temptation for those who are a part of the Democratic Party to think that the Republicans, everything they say is evil, and vice versa. And so sometimes it's difficult to see any validity in your opponent's critique. But I want to ask you, because I noticed that last night when you were at Villanova at the town hall, you expressed what you said, I'm putting in quotes, cautious support for the deal. Looks right now like the president has the votes. So it's going to be, there's nothing basically that the Republican controlled House and Senate can do to stop this from going into existence. Many people have said that it's the only way forward, short of actually going to war with Iran to take away their nuclear capabilities. But is there, any shred of validity in what the Republicans are saying in the sense of, is there a real threat out there? Now, I've listened, I read some of what the Ayatollah, the Grand Ayatollah in Iran has said. He's the supreme leader, right, of Iran. So he's really the guy in charge. And on the one hand, he says, that it's not consistent with his faith to have nuclear weapons. But he has said on record, essentially that Israel should be gone. So, is this just saber rattling? Is this just, I know I threw a lot out there for you, but is this just kind of what we see in our country where, any morning you could turn on Morning Joe or CNN, New Day, and you'll hear, two people who were both elected to Congress saying outlandish things that they would never do, it would never happen. Or is there really something we need to be concerned about over there?
Well, I think the most striking thing they say, and why I say I have cautious support of this, is they say, well, the Iranians are going to cheat. They very well may. But here's where the truth is. If they cheat, the inspection regime that has been established to go in and verify that they're following it is the most intrusive of any arms control agreement we have ever had with the Soviet Union, or even as we tried to stop the North Koreans from having a nuclear device. 150 individuals can go in and inspect at an instant notice. And if we think the Ayatollah is building a bomb in his basement, it doesn't mean you can just knock on the door and go in because it's a new place. And we say, wait a minute, we think you're building a bomb there. He said, well, where's your evidence? And we say, here it is. And he says, reclamas. Could take up to 3 weeks, but in 3 weeks it goes to a panel, and that panel is dominated by the West, the Western powers. It's veto-proof, so to speak, that we can go in. And if there was nuclear material there, well, you know what? If anybody has ever dealt with nuclear material, alpha, beta, gamma radiation, it would take probably months, if not years, to eradicate beta. Gamma would be there for years and years. So the traces would be there. So in a sense, they say, well, they're going to cheat, and we may not notice it. No, we will catch them, much like Ronald Reagan did with the Soviet Union, and it boxed them back in. So to me, that's the important aspect of this agreement, that it does have a verification regime.
So then that helps me and probably some listeners as well, because when you listen to the critics of the deal, I should say they're not all Republican, because the president does not have all Democrats on board. Most vocal is been Charles Schumer from New York against it, and others. But the way in which it's been characterized, I guess the weakness of it, or the shortcoming of it, or the loophole in it, is that, well, as you said, on notice we can go in to inspect, but that notice I think comes with like 30 days or something before you can get in. So the impression is that they can just kind of sweep up everything, clean it up, and all of a sudden put away their nuclear things, and there'd be no trace. What you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that is just not even possible.
Yes, what I'm saying is two things. Right now in the treaty, any place right now that we suspect or know they've used as a production place for nuclear devices, or with a mine for uranium. I mean, from the very beginning, from the mine all the way to the production, anywhere where we know of is in the treaty. We go in there on a surprise inspection right away. But in the future, if all of a sudden we pick up hints that the Ayatollah, as I was saying, is hiding something in his basement, and we didn't find it before, we have the right to go in at no more than 24 days. Because we go in 2 days if they say okay, but they could argue, and it takes that long to get to this panel system. But the traces of radiation cannot just be evaporated in that period of time. We can pick it up.
So, Congressman, are you ever offended when you hear, folk who want to rush to war? Because there is a lot of talk of we should just go in there and just get them. I mean, people ought to be war weary at this point. We've gone through these 2 wars, longest prolonged period of war for our country, immense loss of life, destabilized an entire region, not to even talk about the loss of civilian lives on that end. Didn't make a whole lot of friends in the process. But are you ever surprised that some of the people who seem to be the most hawkish are people who never served? I mean, now I know Donald Trump said he went to military school as a teenager. So he said he kind of served. I think that's his quote. But does that ever put you off as a person who has been in many conflicts and been in the Navy for years?
Yes, I think you put your finger on the real problem in the United States Senate. For example, how few of both parties have ever served. How few, therefore, understands why a military could stop a problem. Militaries never can fix a problem. I mean, Reverend, do you think we fixed Iraq?
Doesn't well. Wait a minute. Now, Admiral. According to the former Vice President Dick Cheney, he left Iraq in great shape. That's what he said this week. They're on a book tour. You can buy the book, and the book will tell you that Obama messed up Iraq.
Well, as General Colin Powell said before they went in, if you break it, you own it. And ISIS is a splinter from having broken it. No. It was a tragic misadventure. I remember having command of my carrier battle group, and we were bombing into Afghanistan after I came out from that short mission. I was told to take my carrier battle group into the Persian Gulf for what we thought would be the running start to the war of Iraq. I went into Bahrain to meet the fleet commander, and I was asked, hey, what do you think about this, Joe? I said, we're ready to go. And he said, what do you personally think about it? I said, this is a misadventure. It's a tragedy. I said, first of all, we're splitting our forces, but where's the clear or present danger to America? And yet, after those weapons of mass destruction weren't found, who was held accountable for that? Not those, quite frankly, like our President, Senator Toomey, who voted as a congressman to send us to war, visited my aircraft carrier as we were bombing Iraq, came home and voted against every single Veterans Affairs appropriations bill as a congressman and senator up to December. And so when I see him and others saying, hey, wait a moment, let's play more crippling sanctions to Iran, forget this deal, we'll bring them to their knees. Man, I'll tell you, I just walked through a group today, just coming out of it, that we will make this strike if we have to. Why do it now? Because it will take us weeks, if not months, to beat down the hundreds of missiles they can rain down upon us, the ships at sea, as well as the troops in Bahrain and UAE, as well as Israel. And then we can only stop their development of that program for 4 years before they're back up. And so before we do this or play whack-a-mole with our military, why don't we see if we can't fix the problem by this means that we've been discussing, this agreement with Iran?
Yeah. Diplomacy, it has to work for us. So, Admiral, Congressman Joe Sestak, thank you for taking time to call in, and maybe we can get you back on as we could talk about the Syrian refugee problem. And really, it's an extension of what we started trying to fix with bombs in the first place. So, my best to you out there on the trail. And again, thank you so very much for calling in to Urban Insight.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Ray.
All right. God bless you.